In Libya, more NATO airstrikes have reportedly struck the capital, Tripoli, following a defiant broadcast from Colonel Gaddafi. Meeting in Washington, Barack Obama and NATO head Anders Fogh Rasmussen agreed to continue bombing as long as the Libyan leader puts up a fight. But as RT's Lauren Lister reports, the motivation of the US-led alliance is under scrutiny.
Several decades and wars later, it's still the question that's top of mind when it comes to the world's largest military alliance.
Many people, I think, today wonder, after the end of the Cold War, why NATO?
Lo and behold,
The reality is that NATO is busier than ever.
set up to counter perceived threats from the Soviet Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has plowed ahead without an enemy.
After the end of the Cold War, some felt that the alliance lost its reason to exist.
Instead, what happened, in fact, and in violation of even the accords and the agreements at that time, was NATO aggressively expanded.
And a larger alliance that once promised peace has instead pledged bombs and troops to Afghanistan going on a decade. And in its latest endeavor, lobs airstrikes into Libya. Despite uniting on new strategic goals back in November, Libya has launched the allies into discord.
Some countries don't want to actually, shoot ground targets. Some will just hit air targets, which there are none.
Amidst the infighting, it's unclear what motives are really behind the planes flying in the name of NATO over the African country. Is it the personal aspirations of a leader? France was among the first to push for intervention.
France wants to get in on what I call the imperial condominium of reconquest of Africa.
Is it the showcase in a new arms race?
Military buyers love to have weapons that are tested in war. If your weapon system does very well in the war, you can count on sales going up.
In fact, the only two planes now in contention for a $10 billion order of 126 planes from India are the Eurofighter Typhoon and the French Rafale, the very ones French and British allies have been flying over Libya. Is it the opportunity to oust the Gaddafi regime?
It is U.S. policy that Gaddafi needs to go.
And prop up one more favorable to U.S. foreign policy interests.
Try to get a more reliable dictator. And that's exactly what's happening. Of course, describe it as a humanitarian intervention.
A so-called humanitarian intervention that critics argue was never warranted, but which now may be causing a humanitarian crisis.
We didn't stop a bloodbath, but we are prolonging and perpetuating the suffering of civilians in Libya.
Suffering that is now washing up on the shores of NATO allies by the boatload of refugees.
Though the United States has seemingly stepped back from Libya, the U.S. is the #1 contributor to NATO, and therefore many would see the U.S. really as being NATO. Now, this comes at a time when the conflict in Libya on the ground, more and more people are calling a stalemate. And amidst the allied infighting, as well as rising costs in every sense, that same question people have been asking for decades comes to mind.
After the end of the Cold War, why NATO?
Lauren Lister, RT, Washington, D.C.
Now, the Libyan government claims that a NATO airstrike has killed 11 Muslim clerics in the city of Brega. The coalition says the facility it bombed was being used to coordinate attacks on civilians. Anti-NATO activist Rick Rozoff thinks the alliance is intimidating the entire world with its Libyan campaign.
You're talking about what has become a global strike force. And, will they lose face? No, they won't lose face. They bombed Yugoslavia for 78 days 12 years ago. They bombed Libya now, 55, 56 days. And they won't stop until they've achieved their objectives. And other nations around the world can receive two messages. You too can own, if you purchase in the United States, Britain, France, Germany, or Sweden, warplanes can do the same, either in defense or for offensive purposes. And this is what you're threatened with. This is what can come after you if you don't play ball with us, in geopolitical terms. This is a dangerous organization that needs to be abolished, and the world community, the true world community, needs to, assert as strongly as it possibly can that the United Nations and not a U.S.-led military bloc is in charge of resolving conflicts around the world.